Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces and factions of the Warhammer 40k universe. The grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, we shall take a brief look at the historic first contact of the Imperium and the Great Devourer, the Hive Fleets of the Tyranids. For the Tyranids are unique in all of the factions or threats of the Warhammer 40k setting, in that they are the only extragalactic army. They come from the dark void outside of the galaxy of the grim darkness. Some say that they were attracted to our corner of the galaxy by the light of the Astronomicon. Others that it was the explosion of the Ferus beacon during the Horus heresy that first gained their attention. But regardless of the cause, the unstoppable juggernaut of the Hive Fleets have only just begun to make their presence fully known across the entirety of the galaxy. Let us now see exactly what happened in that first instance of the discovery of the Tyranids, and why they are named thusly. An extract from the 8th edition Codex. I feel it does not need any further embellishment. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on this existing wisdom. To quote, the death of Tyran. The first recorded contact with Tyranids happened in early 745 Millennium 41, on the eastern outskirts of the Imperium. Up to this point, mankind was wholly unaware of the new threat on its borders, and if any of the galaxy's older empires were aware of the oncoming swarm, they did not see fit to warn the upstart Imperium. Yet the Hive Fleet had left evidence of its approach for those with the wit to see. Over the course of the preceding decade, Imperial explorators had performed a census of the planetary systems surrounding the far-flung outposts of Tyran Primus. In the course of their survey, these explorators discovered whole worlds scoured of life. Verdant planets known to have been teeming with flora and fauna were now reduced to scorched and barren rock. Not one creature, not even the simplest of bacteria, remained. Though this was reported to the Explorator General of the Administratum, little more was done. The galaxy is a huge place, mysteries commonplace, and the Administratum as slow to act as only a massive labyrinthine bureaucracy can be. As the Tyran outpost dutifully continued to fire reports of dead worlds, the Tyranid Hive Fleets drew inexorably closer. Thus far the Tyranids had consumed only isolated worlds with no intelligent life, replenishing the reserves of biomass expended during the long, slow crawl through the interstellar void. Now reinvigorated, the aliens descended upon Tyran Primus, the first of mankind's worlds to feel their wrath, and the invasion from which the Imperium would name their race. That the Tyran outpost had any warning at all was due to sheer chance. A survey ship, returning from cataloguing another devoured world, encountered a cloud of unidentified objects on the edge of the Tyran system. Though crippled by peculiar fleshy mines on the edges of the cloud, the survey ship managed to escape and limped back to the Tyran Primus base, carrying with it a dire warning. A handful of days later, the invasion began. The outpost of Tyran Primus was no easy prey. Nestled deep in the ruins of an ancient chain of volcanic islands, this base was heavily fortified to resist the fearsome storms and sea creatures of Tyran's wild oceans, and its defenses did not end there. Given Tyran's position on the edge of known space, and its extreme separation from the Imperium's other worlds, it had been founded with armament deemed adequate to deter the attentions of piratical raiders, or repel an aggressive alien presence. 4 giant defense lasers stood guard over the Tyran Primus base, themselves protected by hardened ceramite silos and void shield generators. This already formidable firepower was further complemented by 3 dozen autocannon and las cannon interceptor emplacements, an overlapping network of defense bastions and Proteus-class bunkers. Nor could the planetary garrison be found wanting. In addition to the Skitarii bodyguard of the outpost's commander, Magos Varnak, Tyran boasted 3 full wings of Thunderbolt fighters, 3 Endeavour-class cruisers, and an entire regiment of the Imperial Guard. Such was the standard for a frontier outpost of the Imperium, a design that had proven itself against 100 adversaries. Yet here, against this new alien menace, this formidable arsenal would prove woefully insufficient. The first assault. Tyran's defense lasers opened fire the moment the first alien ships made orbit. For more than an hour, the storm-racked skies of Tyran were split again and again by incandescent blasts, as the base's gunners desperately fended off the descending invaders. Then, just as the cooling systems of the defense lasers began to glow white and overheat, the invaders withdrew. Perhaps buoyed by false confidence, Magos Varnak immediately ordered his small fleet to harry the withdrawing vessels, but this strategy soon proved to be folly. Penetrating the spore cloud of master alien fleet, the pursuing vessels discovered that fewer than a dozen of the strange vessels had been destroyed out of a fleet of several thousand. Having lured the cruisers away from Tyran, the leading edge of bioships suddenly changed direction and fell upon the Imperial vessels with a vengeance. The Emperor's Fist was the first to be destroyed, its hull shredded by a voracious swarm vomited forth by a much smaller vessel. The Righteous Destiny lasted scarcely longer. A cluster of tendrils drew its prow into a hive ship's gaping maw. Only the Sword of Warriors lasted long enough to convey a warning to the Tyran outpost, but before the transmission was completed, leech-like pods gnawed through the starship's adamantium hull, unleashing hundreds of gene stealers directly into the vessel's bridge and decks. The crew was slaughtered within minutes, leaving the unhelmed cruiser adrift in space. With the Imperium's cruisers destroyed, the Hive Fleet returned to Tyran, and this time the defense could not hold them back. Thousands of Tyranocytes descended onto the world, and, though the defense lasers destroyed many, countless hundreds more crashed into the seas. All around the base, the seas thrashed and boiled as the invaders burst from their pods and tore their way through the ferocious inhabitants of Tyran's oceans. Then the first invaders scaled the walls. At first, the disciplined volleys of the Imperial Guard drove the creatures back. Amongst their ranks were veterans from Katachan, well used to combating alien monsters, and they would not easily yield. Officers bellowed orders through the pouring rain, and torrents of firepower sighed deep into the alien ranks. The hides of the smaller beasts were a scant protection against a torrent of lasgun fire, and offered no defense at all from the booming autocannons of the interceptor grid. Wave after wave of Hormagaunts and Gene Stealers were torn apart, their corpses choking the rain-lashed killing zones between the bastions. Thunderbolts darted through the skies above, expertly jinking through the lightning-chased skies, blasting apart incoming pods with precision fire before turning to intercept new targets. Then the northern defense laser fell silent. Thousands of gargoyles had mindlessly thrown themselves into its throat, clogging the massive beam projectors with their incinerated bodies. Moments later, the eastern defense laser complex ceased firing as an enormous carnifex rammed through the reinforced steel walls, trampled over the defenders, and hurled itself at the coolant lines. One by one, the Thunderbolt fighters tumbled from the skies, their engines choked by spores, or their cockpits torn apart by shrieking harpies. As more and more of the defense networks went dark, the Tyranocytes began to fall onto the base itself. The swarm triumphant. An hour later, and the Tyran outpost was as good as lost. The bastions were overrun or destroyed, the defense laser complexes fallen silent. Even the guardsmen tempered on the harsh death world of distant Katachan, men and women who had reckoned themselves amongst the toughest, most stalwart of warriors, abandoned their posts and fled into the driving rain of search for an escape that did not exist. Here and there, pockets of resistance still held out under the watchful gaze of a brave or foolhardy officer, but one by one, these were extinguished. Only the command bunker remained, and its walls began to crack under the impact of massive blows. Through the few functioning displays, Varnak saw the flood of aliens rampaging through his once impregnable base, destroying everything they found. Finally, the adamantium gate of the bunker crashed inwards, and the Tyranids poured into the command complex. Guardsmen and Skitarii fought back with flamers, but the aliens swarmed through the searing fires and hacked their way onwards. As Hormigons poured into the command center, Varnak whispered a final prayer to the Emperor and triggered a switch, sending a data codex plummeting into the depth of the base. This codex would be Tyran's enduring legacy, for it would be recovered many months later by one Inquisitor Cryptman, a man who would dedicate his life to opposing the Tyranid menace. But for Cryptman's arrival, Tyran's fate might have gone unnoticed by the wider Imperium for millennia. He found a blasted and sterile planet, unrecognizable as the teeming ocean world it had once been. The planet had been sucked dry. As Cryptman reviewed the autologs contained within the data codex, the full horror of Tyran's downfall was revealed. Wasting not another moment, the Inquisitor set forth to warn the rest of the galaxy of the oncoming horror from beyond the stars. A horror Cryptman named Tyranids, for the world they had consumed. The Tyrannic Wars had begun. End quote. And so we see the attack that has been repeated on so many worlds, across nearly every segmentum and sector of the Imperium. But I can assure you, they have certainly not confined their onward rush, their drive to dine, on the worlds controlled by humanity alone. And in the future, we shall explore the Hive Fleets, how they nearly destroyed the most powerful of all Eldar craft worlds, are a scourge to even the unliving and undying hordes of the Necrons, and how their initial onward rush brought them into a life-or-death struggle with the most lauded and most honored of all Space Marine chapters, the Ultramarines themselves. I look forward to it with relish. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief entry concerning initial contact with the Tyranids. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you see the worth in what we are doing, then do also consider joining our Patreon, or giving the video a share if that is beyond your present scope. It would be a great boon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.